published the first version of Fahrenheit, the Fireman, in a science fiction magazine, Galaxy, in February 1951, and Ballantine came along, and they read that short novel of 25,000 words and said, "Can you extend the novel? Can you write another 25,000 words? And we'll publish a full novel, and you've got to find a title for it, though. The Fireman is not it." I got curious, at what temperature does book paper catch fire and burn? So I called the chemistry department at UCLA. They didn't know. I called SC, and they didn't know. I said, "Dummy, call the fire department." So I called the fire chief at the fire department in downtown LA. I said, "Mr. Chief, could you tell me at what temperature book paper catches fire and burns?" He says, "Wait, I'll be right back." He came back and he said, "Book paper catches fire and burns at 451 degrees Fahrenheit." I said, "That's good, so I'll reverse it. It's got to be Fahrenheit 451. So that's how I found out what the temperature was. When I moved into LA with my family, I had 2 daughters. I needed an office because my daughters were very loud and wonderful and lovely, but I had no money for an office. I was wandering around up at UCLA, and I heard typing in a room down in the basement. And I went down to the basement, and I found a room had 12 typewriters in it. I could rent a typewriter for 10 cents a half hour. So I said, "My God, this is my office." Doesn't matter, I was surrounded by students. I got a bag of dimes. I moved into the typing room in the basement of the library, and I spent $9 and $9.80, and I wrote Fahrenheit 451 in its first form, called The Fireman. But the exciting thing about that was running up and down stairs and grabbing books and bringing them down to my typewriter and opening them, finding a quote I could put in the book for Montag to read. So you see, what a place for Fahrenheit 451 to be written, in the library of all places where it wasn't being burned. So I made a contract with Ballantine, and I went to the library again, with the typing in the typing room, and I added 25,000 words. How did I do that? I got the characters to come to me. Montag came and said, "Do you know who I am completely?" I said, "No." I said, "Tell me." And the fire chief came to me, and he told me about his prior life. I said to the fire chief, "Why did you burn books?" And he told me. And Clarice McClellan came, who was a 16-year-old girl who was in love with books and libraries and life, and she told me more about herself. And Fabers came to me, and he was a philosopher, and he wrote the book. You see, all my characters write the book. I don't write the book. All these characters come to me and say, "Listen to me," and then I listen to them, and I put it down, and the book gets written. That's how I write, you see. All these lovers surround me, and they love life, and they tell me about it. When I came out of a restaurant when I was 30 years old, and I went walking along Wilshire Boulevard with a friend, and a police car pulled up, and the policeman got up and came up to us and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Putting one foot in front of the other." And that was the wrong answer, but he kept saying, "Look in this direction and that direction. There are no pedestrians." But that gave me the idea for the pedestrian, and the pedestrian turned into Montag, so the police officer is responsible for the writing of Fahrenheit 451. The book was very well received because up until it was published, most of my books didn't get reviewed. They got obituary reviews about an inch big. But Fahrenheit came out, and well-known authors all over the United States wrote me letters about it and reacted to it. So at long last, I was accepted into the intellectual community. Well, Isherwood helped me first. When I was 30 years old, he called me on the phone. I'd given him a copy of the Martian Chronicles, and he called me. He says, "My God," he said, "Mr. Bradbury, do you know what you've written?" I said, "What?" He said, "You've written an extraordinary book. I'm going to review it for Tomorrow Magazine." So he changed my life. It was the first big review. And he called me and he said, "Aldous Huxley wants to meet you." And Aldous Huxley was the author of Brave New World, my hero. I'd love to meet Aldous Huxley. So I went to have tea with him one day, and Mr. Huxley leaned forward and said, "Mr. Bradbury, do you know what you are?" I said, "What?" He said, "You're a poet. You're a poet." And he told me I was a poet. You see, my publishers told me I was a novelist. I didn't know I was a novelist because I was in love. And he tells me I'm a poet. I didn't know I was a poet because I was in love with Shakespeare, Emily Dickinson, and all the great poets. But you see what love does for you? You don't know what you are because you're in love. Clarice is me. Clarice McClellan is Ray Bradbury, the young boy who fell in love with life. And Clarice is the essence of life and the essence of love. And she educates Montag without knowing she's an educator. She's a librarian. She's a teacher who inspires. And he then dares to go home and steal a book and look at it because Clarice McClellan, Ray Bradbury, told him to do it.